Hello, English 242, British Lit 2 students. It's Dr. Mills. I'm back with you today to give you the lecture for week two. This week we're talking about Percy Bysshe Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, and also John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn and his other poem, To Autumn. A little bit first on Percy Bysshe Shelley, who lived from 1792 to 1822, not very long at all. Percy Bysshe Shelley was one of the most radical and imaginative voices of the Romantic period. Born into an aristocratic family in Sussex, England, he rejected many of the traditional values of his class, including organized religion, monarchy, and conventional politics. His early writings reflected his rebellious spirit. He was even expelled from Oxford for publishing a pamphlet titled The Necessity of Atheism. Shelley's life was as turbulent as his poetry. He eloped with his first wife, Harriet Westbrook, but later left her for Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, who would become the author of Frankenstein years later. Shelley and Mary's circle included other Romantic writers like Lord Byron, and their lives were marked by travel, scandal, and controversy. Tragically, Shelley drowned in a boating accident off the coast of Italy at the age of 29. Despite his short life, Shelley produced some of the most passionate and visionary works of the Romantic era, including Prometheus Unbound, Adonais, which was his elegy for Keats, and his great political and lyrical odes, among them Ode to the West Wind. Shelley's reputation in his own time was mixed. His radical politics and his also unorthodox personal life scandalized polite society, but later generations would recognize him as a prophetic voice of romantic idealism. His verse often unites dazzling natural imagery with urgent calls for political and spiritual renewal. More than many romantics, Shelley conceived of poetry as an instrument of change, famously declaring that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. In Ode to the West Wind, Shelley addresses the autumn wind as a mighty, almost divine force of nature. The wind is both a destroyer and a preserver. It scatters dead leaves, but also carries seeds that will bring new life in spring. Shelley longs to be lifted up and carried by the wind, asking it to spread his words and ideas across the world like ashes and sparks. The poem ends with one of his most famous lines: "If winter comes, can spring be far behind?" This is both a literal reference to the seasons and a metaphor for hope, that even in times of despair, renewal is always possible. The structure of the poem reinforces its energy and its urgency. Written in 5 cantos of terza rima, the same rhyme scheme that Dante used in the Divine Comedy, the form gives the poem a sense of forward driving motion, echoing the wind's unstoppable force. Shelley personifies the wind as a wild spirit that moves through the realms, the earth, driving leaves and seeds, the sky, shaping storms and clouds, and the sea, stirring up the waves. This version of nature reflects Shelley's fascination with the elemental forces that govern life. On a personal level, Shelley identifies with the wind, seeing it both as freedom and as power. He admits his own human limitations. His tameless, swift, and proud spirit has been weighed down by a heavy weight of hours. Thus, the poem is also a cry for inspiration, a plea that his poetry might be as vital and transformative as the wind itself. Critically, Ode to the West Wind is often read as both political and personal. The wind's ability to scatter dead thoughts and carry new birth can be seen as a metaphor for revolution, sweeping away the old order to make room for renewal. But it is also deeply introspective, revealing Shelley's anxiety about his own voice, mortality, and his poetic legacy. The closing line, "If winter comes, can spring be far behind," captures Shelley's essential optimism. Even destruction and death are a part of a large cycle of rebirth. This romantic faith in nature's rhythms offers consolation and hope in times of crisis. Next, we're going to talk about John Keats. By the way, the password for this week's lecture quiz is Keats, Keats, all lowercase. John Keats's last name. John Keats was born in London in 1795, had a short life as well, died in 1821. He was born to a modest family. He lost both of his parents by the time he was a teenager and was initially trained as an apothecary, which is a kind of doctor. But his passion was poetry, and he chose to just dedicate himself fully to writing, even though it brought very little financial reward. Keats' short life was marked by illness, especially tuberculosis, which also killed his mother and his brother. He fell in love with a woman named Fanny Brawne, but never married her due to his declining health. He died in Rome at the age of 25 and was buried with the words, "Here lies one whose name was writ in water," on his gravestone, a sign of how uncertain he was about his legacy. Today, Keats is recognized as one of the most important poets in English literature. His major works include Endymion, Hyperion, and his series of odes, including Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on Melancholy, and the ones you're reading this week. Keats' reputation grew only after his death, largely due to the efforts of his friends like Percy Bysshe Shelley and critics who later came to value his extraordinary craftsmanship. During his lifetime, Keats was often ridiculed in the press, especially for being a Cockney poet from a lower class background. Despite this, his work demonstrates remarkable technical mastery, sensitivity to sound and imagery, and a preoccupation with themes of beauty, mortality, and transience. Unlike Byron or Shelley, who were drawn to political or philosophical concerns, Keats is often described as a poet of sensations, immersing his readers in texture, color, and the fleeting intensity of experience. Again, the password for this week's lecture is Keats, all lowercase, Keats. In Ode on a Grecian Urn, Keats looks at an ancient piece of art, a Greek urn decorated with images, and reflects on what it represents. The figures painted on the urn are frozen in time, lovers who never kiss, musicians who never stop playing, and a festival that never ends. To Keats, the urn is both beautiful and mysterious. It tells a story that never changes, unlike real life, which is full of uncertainty and loss. This creates a sort of paradox. The urn is eternal, but also silent. It can never explain itself. It simply is. The famous final lines of the poem, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty," have been debated for generations. What do they mean? Is Keats saying that art gives us kind of truth that life cannot? Or is he acknowledging that the search for meaning may itself be part of the beauty? What's clear is that Keats is fascinated by how art can preserve moments that are otherwise lost in time, and how that preservation comes with its own costs. This ode demonstrates Keats' philosophy of negative capability, his belief that great art often resides in uncertainty, mystery, and doubt, rather than in neat solutions. The urn embodies permanence, yet its figures are locked in an internal incompleteness. Lovers who are never able to fulfill their embrace. Melodies that are always anticipated but never concluded. In this sense, the urn raises questions about the relationship between art and life. Art can arrest time and preserve beauty, but life's value may lie in its impermanence. The closing statement, beauty is truth, truth is beauty, has provoked centuries of argument. Some see it as Keats's bold claim that the aesthetic experience reveals essential truths. Others interpret it as ironic or deliberately ambiguous, an acknowledgement that art provides no ultimate answers, only a reflection of human longing. The unresolved nature of this conclusion makes the poem both frustrating and also profoundly moving for some people. To Autumn is often considered Keats' most perfect poem. It's a celebration of the season of harvest, not just in a literal sense, but as a metaphor for maturity, acceptance, and quiet reflection. Unlike many of his earlier works, which focus on longing or grief, To Autumn feels peaceful and full. Keats uses vivid sensory imagery to bring the season to life. The ripening fruit, the buzzing bees, the low sun, and the gentle music of a fading year. Beneath the surface, the poem also hints at endings. Autumn is beautiful, but it leads to winter. This awareness gives the poem a bittersweet tone. Keats, who was likely already suffering from tuberculosis when he wrote it, seems to be finding peace in the natural rhythms of life. The poem's structure, three stanzas, each rich with detail, mirrors the slow, inevitable passage of time. It asks us to stop and pay attention to what's here now and not what's past or what's coming. To Autumn is remarkable for its balance, where Ode on a Grecian Urn wrestles with paradox and ambiguity. To Autumn seems to achieve a momentary resolution. Its imagery is tactile and immersive. Swollen gourds, warm days, buzzing swarms, the red-stained sunset. The poem contains no overt human figures, only the personification of autumn itself as a laborer, a gleaner, or a harvester, emphasizing the season's universality. Critics often read this ode as Keats' most mature statement, not because it denies mortality, but because it accepts it. Autumn's richness is inseparable from the knowledge of decline. Fullness carries the seed of emptiness. Some scholars even suggest that To Autumn reflects Keats' confrontation with his own mortality, turning what might have been despair into an affirmation of life's beauties in its fleetingness. Where Ode on a Grecian Urn seeks permanence in art, To Autumn finds permanence in the cycles of nature itself. Both poems taken together present Keats' enduring question. How do we reconcile beauty with transience? And what can art or nature teach us about the meaning of human life? That's it for today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the poems by Keats and Shelley and that you're able to fulfill the responsibilities of the week easily. If not, reach out. All right. Talk to you next week. Signing out.